Welcome, everyone. My name is Kurt Titelmeyer, and I am the Special Projects Coordinator with Culture Days Manitoba. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar. This webinar is entitled Bursting the Bubble, and it's all about how to improve and develop messaging to your audience as the pandemic shifts. We feel that the arts and events organizers are in a unique situation. It's a post-vaccine, mid-Delta wave, just starting out to really open up kind of world out there, and we are here to help. The good news is that we have a stellar lineup of communication and marketing specialists lined up that are here to help you strategize and confidently message your audiences. Okay, before we get started, I'd like to do a couple thank yous. I'm going to do a land acknowledgement, and I'm also going to talk a little bit about the format of the webinar. Okay, so we're going to start off with the thank yous. The Culture Days Manitoba would like to thank the Manitoba Arts Council for supporting this initiative to support event organizers. I'd like to thank Jennifer Cheslock, the Culture Days General Manager, for allowing me to coordinate this. And this webinar is being hosted by both the Culture Days Manitoba office and our national office in Toronto. So I'd like to thank the national office team for helping me develop this curricula. So I'd like to give a thank you to Shannon Bowler, Executive Director, Alyssa Trudeau, Communications and Programmer, and Fernanda Sierra, Marketing and Network Coordinator. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is between both Winnipeg and Toronto, our provincial office and national office. I'm going to do a land acknowledgement here that has both the peoples and territories of Toronto and the peoples and territories of Winnipeg. The Culture Days Network is present and active in all corners of the country and collaborates with a vast array of people, organizations, and communities across Indigenous territories. Culture Days is committed to working with First Nations, Métis, and Inuit communities, seeking to uphold equity for all to participate in supporting a diversity of art forms and cultural expressions. The Culture Days National Office is located on the treaty lands and territory of the Mississauga of the Credit and the traditional territory of many peoples and nations across, including the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Chippewa, and the Wendat people. Today, the City of Toronto remains the home and meeting place for many Indigenous peoples, whose presence and cultures contribute to shape and influence communities. We are grateful to live and work on this land. The Culture Days Manitoba offices are located on the original lands of the Anishinaabe, the Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of the Métis Nation. We are humbly broadcasting from here. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what to expect today and kind of the rules of engagement for this webinar. All right. So firstly, you probably noticed the registrants, your mic and videos will be muted during this webinar. And during the webinar, we're going to have 3 diverse presentations by our panelists. And I will give a brief introduction to each panelist, and then I'll let them take it away. Now, we really encourage engagement in this workshop. So if you have a question, there's a little question and answer tab at the bottom of the Zoom bar. We encourage you to put questions in there. We have some tech support behind the scenes, and they will answer, or they will let you know that we've received the question. And at the end of all 3 presentations, we will answer the questions. So if you have a question, feel free to let it fly, go right in the question and answer box. We'll get to it at the end of presentations. There's also a general comment box. And if you have some comments, you can throw them in there. We also are going to provide 2 websites in there because this is a very exciting time for Culture Days right now. We are just ramping up for our festival. The festival this year will run between September 24th and October 24th. There's still time to register events. And coming up this Friday is the deadline to register in-person events. So we hope that this webinar gives you a little bit of help and mentorship on how to communicate for those events. And if you're on the fence whether to put on an event, there's still time to register. So we will put in the general comment bar the Culture Days national website and also Culture Days Manitoba website. So the deadline to register in-person events is this Friday, and you can register online events right up to September 24th. Okay, finally, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the engagement of this webinar. We have prepared PDFs of these presentations. So you will also receive a text version of these presentations if you'd like to reference them afterwards. Additionally, we're recording this webinar right now, and we're going to do some captions, and we're going to post it later. So follow the National Culture Days website if you'd like to share it with someone else or watch it again. It will be available shortly. Okay, and the last thing I'd like to talk about is that we're dealing with a political climate in Canada right now. There's an election going on, and the idea of vaccine passports and all these things is somewhat a hot topic. This webinar rather, is more about giving you strategies to message during this difficult time. We're not going to be discussing whether the passports are valid or restrictions are valid. It's not really what it's about. We're here to give you strategies to communicate to your audience. So without further ado, I'm very excited. We're going to jump in to our first panelist. Okay, so our first panelist that we have today is Katie Inverarity. Now, Katie is currently the Director of Marketing and Communications for the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre in Winnipeg. Previous positions held include Director of Marketing and Communications for the Canadian Stage Company, Director of Executive Recruitment for TRG, and has also held marketing positions with the Windsor Symphony Orchestra, Mirvis Productions, and the Toronto Symphony Orchestra. In fall of 2018, Katie joined the board of directors of the Laurel Centre in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and is currently serving as board chair. Katie is an alumnus of Leadership Winnipeg and the Banff Centre Cultural Leadership Program. So without further ado, welcome, Katie Inverarity.
Thank you, Kurt, for the warm welcome and introduction. Here we go. Today I have broken my brief presentation down into 4 strategies. I'm going to focus on internal and then external. Internally, we're going to talk about breaking down departmental silos, creating bespoke communications, leveraging all of that wonderful digital content, and then we'll turn our view externally, and we're going to talk about considering your greater community. These are all strategies that we have implemented during the pandemic, but I really think they are best practices that we can continue to use in brighter days ahead. So let's start with breaking down the departmental silos. Within days of COVID hitting, we recognized the need to get all public and patron-facing teams and staff on the same page with communication strategies. We really reimagined how we would all work together. We came together as one team, development, marketing, and patron services. We maximized our resources, we provided emotional support, and we became one collective force. But more importantly, we became one voice. And really, we did this through new weekly team meetings of all of these teams coming together. And why was this important? This is important because your patrons don't care that you have multiple departments, but you should. The patrons of the Manitoba Theatre Centre don't have a relationship with development, marketing, or patron services. They have a relationship with the Manitoba Theatre Centre. So to help guide these weekly meetings, we went old school and we created an integrated schedule. This schedule was detailed. It included if there was a social media post or an updated marquee being published. So it included a date, time, and yes, time, because many days we had many messages going out on the same day. The segment, who was it going out to? What team was deploying it? What form was that message taking? And then what was the message? Speaking of message, we all got on the same message. We read each other's work. We supported each other. There was so much confusing information out there. It was critical that as an organization, we were never publishing or pushing out conflicting information from one department to another or anything that was out of date. This weekly team meeting really increased awareness as well of the work that we were all doing. Specifically, I would say it helped us identify gaps. We had faced staff layoffs and reduced hours. So that awareness, that new awareness became really important when we considered, say, sending out a big patron email But don't send it out if we don't have box office staff that day, because they're just not in the building. So that awareness became really important. I would also suggest that this time we broke down silos with our artistic director and executive director, so with senior leadership. I'm going to make a bold statement, and I'm going to say put communications at the center of decision-making for your organization. I'm going to share with you a real life but trimmed down example of what I call my announcement calculator. The organization had like back in January, we had to make decisions around when we would announce our 2021 season. What shape is it going to be? How many productions? How many performances? What are the plays? And so I decided on behalf of my communications colleagues to take charge of the timing of the situation. So I built this little real life calculator, and I said to our leadership, from a patron standpoint and from a staffing standpoint, our best day to announce is Monday, May 10th. So if we're going to do that, I need you to have a board meeting on April 12th and get it approved. And then all this just kind of reverse engineers here of the timing. And so I had my dream date, I gave option 2 and I gave option 3. And gold star, I'm happy to report that the organization did achieve kind of my dream scenario. So my message to you is, if you are responsible for major communications at your organization, put yourself at the center of it. Don't let it happen to you. Create a scenario where you can be successful and you can best protect your patrons. Next, we're going to talk about bespoke communications. This is the time, if you are fortunate enough to have a database for your organization that houses patron information, you need to optimize that database. ABS, always be segmenting. What is segmenting? Segmenting is when you take a large list and you break it down into smaller lists, thereby creating bespoke communications. You need to know your patron and you need to create personalized messaging. I'm going to show you an example of, so we had canceled productions back 18, 19, 30 months ago, whenever this started. And so we need to talk to those patrons and understand where they're at in their relationship with us. So some of those ticket holder segments might be the non-responders. Hi, we haven't heard from you, and we get it, but we'd like to hear from you. Thanks for donating the value of your ticket. Thank you for your faith and leaving your money on account. I now want to sell you something. Thank you for your interest. Here's your refund. Please note, and the note is about how many days it takes the bank to process your refund. So we created all of these. Let me back up for 1 second. We worked really hard to create bespoke communications that we push out into the world. It's not uncommon for us to have between 10 and 15 different segments of like one email going out. So basically think it's not one size fit all. You want custom. Then we also created some bespoke experiences on the digital path on the receiving end. So depending on how a patron interacted with an email, it took them to a designated web page or a form or whatever it was we wanted them to do. Because what we wanted to avoid happening was having our patrons, all of them, dump onto one web page with a whole bunch of information that wasn't relevant to them. Bespoke communications. So you're hearing all of this and you say to me, but Katie, I don't have the staff to do this. I don't have the resources. Thanks, nice try. But the goal when creating bespoke communications or personalized messaging is that you really are giving patrons the information that they need. Putting the best message in front of the right patron at the right time is going to more likely get you to your desired outcome. So it's going to increase your success. So that's argument number 1 as to why you should try and have bespoke communications. Number 2 is going to lead to less staff follow-up. So we mentioned about short staffs. I don't have the staff. I would argue the more staff work that you do on the front end in creating your bespoke communications leads to less cleanup work for your frontline staff, whether it's a development officer or a box office person answering a phone or an email. Like if you don't send out bespoke communications, you're just leading to a lot of cleanup that needs to happen if your patron cares enough to even respond to you. And finally, this is going to improve your long-term relationship with patrons, especially during a pandemic. The better that you treat your patrons today, the more that they're going to stick with you. When COVID hit, it's no surprise that our industry rallied and we demonstrated incredible resiliency and creativity and welcomed the onslaught of digital content. So much digital content. At MTC, we realized about 3 or 4 months into this journey, our digital content creation was a bit out of control and we didn't have a plan. And so we had to create a digital strategy. And really that strategy just helped us answer the questions of why, who, and what. So why? And my message here on this whole slide to you is if you're considering creating digital content, start with why. Why are you creating it? Not just because is not the answer. So we often answered that question, well, it was for a donor or patron engagement, or it was a message of gratitude. We wanted to say thank you, or we wanted to create art. We wanted our artists to work. We wanted our crew, our craftspeople to work. Okay, so who was it going to? Well, not surprising, donors, volunteers. We have many volunteers who we need to engage with. The general community, general public, educators. What were we creating? Well, we made Zoom donor events such as Cocktails with the Creators. We published a digital magazine and we created educator videos that were designed for individual students, classrooms, or teachers. We sent out many messages of gratitude. We activated our digital marquee and we created full-length productions. So in creating this digital strategy to help kind of rein us in, did this reduce work for us? Sadly, no, but it did shine a light on where we had gaps or opportunities. So, we might look at it and say, oh gosh, we haven't talked to our volunteers in 6 months. We probably need to reach out to them. And maybe we send a cheery message from our Director of Patron Services. So I just say to you, if you're creating digital content, just ask yourself why. And finally, let's turn externally. Those were our internal strategies. So externally, I'm going to ask you to consider your external community when you are pushing out communications. And your definition of community might change with each message or announcement that you're sending out. I have some examples. So I'll share with you the Manitoba Theatre Centre produces the Winnipeg Fringe Theatre Festival. When it became very clear that we were not going to be able to present an in-person festival, we had to consider a strategy around timing of that announcement to not hoop any of our friends or colleagues. So first we looked to the Fringe festivals across the country. So typically that festival goes from East Coast to West Coast. So that means we couldn't announce before anyone in Ontario was announcing, because if we did, then that would lead to a lot of confusion and upset in Ontario. We also had to look locally. So specifically, the Folk Festival was a really big consideration. So again, we knew we were canceling the festival, but we worked with the Folk Festival to align with their timing, or rather to let them announce first, because their festival was scheduled before us. And again, had we come out and announced our cancellation, that would have really hooped that team at the Folk Festival to have to deal with their artists, their patrons, the media, you name it. So the leadership of all these organizations continue to work together to help one another. And then I'm going to share 2 final examples. These were recent news stories around the various announcements around vaccine mandates. Not saying if vaccine mandates are pro or con, but this first is a story from CBC where the Manitoba Theatre Centre worked with the Centennial Concert Hall to announce at the same time that there would be a staff and audience vaccine mandate. Again, not like making anyone have to announce questions when you're not ready to announce them. So just getting on the same page. And another example, University of Manitoba, University of Winnipeg, the news broke on the same day of their staff and student vaccine mandate. So I don't work for those institutions, but you can be sure that they work really closely together to make that happen. Okay, I raced through that. Here's my contact information. If anything sparked any ideas or questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to chat. And I will stop sharing. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Katie. That was great. We really enjoyed that. It was great to hear your personal experiences at the Royal Manitoba Theatre Centre too. For the sake of time, we're going to move right into the next one. And just a quick reminder that we do have a question and answer box. Feel free to put some questions in there and we will get to them at the end of all 3 presentations. Okay, next up, we have Cody Chomniak. As the Vice President and Industry Engagement, Cody leads the customer-facing teams for Banwango, building the brand, enhancing product offerings, driving innovation, and supporting its clients across North America. He brings over a decade of economic development and tourism marketing knowledge and will help clients create experiences that increase engagement and support local businesses. Prior to Banwango, Cody spent over 10 years as the Director of Marketing for Economic Development Winnipeg and Tourism Winnipeg. He created and executed strategic marketing plans and award-winning campaigns to grow the economy through business and talent attraction and visitation. Cody has extensive background in marketing, branding, graphic design, and advertising. So without further ado, we're going to listen to Cody Chomiak.
Thanks so much, everybody, and thanks so much for having me. All right, I'm going to go straight into my presentation. So my goal today, I'm going to give you some really tangible takeaways that you can implement right now to your team, not only in uncertain times, but as a best practice for everything. As we kind of navigate not only the pandemic, we look at things like political shifts or crises, environmental disasters, changes in plans. Things change very, very quickly, and we need to be making sure that we are reacting. So to start off, I'm going to segment out the takeaways into strategies for your partners and members, and then look at strategies when working with your team, if you happen to work with a larger team, as well as volunteers, and then also strategies for your audiences. And we'll touch a little bit on how you can leverage technology to help achieve some of these goals. So for your partners and members, email is really still the gold standard. I think it's the one audience that you actually own. Social media channels are fantastic, but the audiences are only, the people that see it are only as many as the social media platform allows to see. Whereas email, you really own that first party data, and first party data is so, so important. And as the previous speaker mentioned, really segmenting those email lists out into relevant, smaller segmented lists, really, really great advice. Video is a great option to embed in an email and do a video link. Just make sure it has good sound, but it doesn't have to be fancy. An iPhone works perfectly. That's something that's really, really easy to do. One-off shot, and then send that out for your communications. Facebook groups or social media groups are a really great way for your members and your partners to be able to collaborate and share ideas and get connected and put concerns into a closed place where you can moderate and share ideas. As well, creating a toolkit on your website, if you can, is really, really helpful. You want to make it as easy as possible for your partners to act as megaphones, to amplify whatever it is that you are messaging, and to make sure that you have stuff in tangible, bite-sized forms. So boilerplates, pre-crafted tweets or posts on social that people can use, image assets if you can. Those things are really, really helpful, as well as links to helpful programs. And you just want to make it as easy as possible, again, for those partners to really pair up what you're saying, but also find the information that they need really, really easily. For your specific team or your volunteers, I think it's so critical to have a comprehensive crisis communication strategy as well as a business continuity plan. They don't have to be, super, super crazy, but really what you want to make sure is, who do I contact? What's the protocol? Who can answer what? And where do I need to go to find the information? And if something does happen within the respective office, how do we back up information? How do we make sure that we can continue operating, remotely if we needed to? Make sure that all of your staff, as well as your volunteers, are properly trained so that you don't have a volunteer maybe answering something that they shouldn't be speaking to, but also that they know who they can refer that person to, so that people's questions are certainly answered. You don't want to leave something that is certainly unanswered and you look like you're trying to hide something or not being responsive. A really big tip is setting up social listening. There's a lot of tools and dashboards that are out there to help you, but really just making sure that you're monitoring your channels, monitoring feeds online, and tracking sentiment. And that is so huge. Is sentiment really allows you the ability to customize and curate your wording and your messaging to enhance it. When I was in tourism during the height of the pandemic, there was a lot of anti-travel sentiment. There was a lot of angst towards outsiders. We had to really be very cautious about navigating the messaging to make sure that we were being respectful of that current sentiment. And it does change throughout seasons. So it is really important to be tracking that. And then making sure that whatever contact lists that you have, they're as current as possible. And CRMs are a really great tool. There's a lot out there. And I know even Salesforce has some opportunities for smaller organizations at a very, very reasonable price point to leverage them. For your audiences, It's all about being the one source of truth. You need to be transparent and you need to be trustworthy, really making sure that you are that one source for whatever it is that's relevant to that audience, making sure that all of your digital properties are up to date. So looking at things like your Google My Business listing, looking at your website, making sure that all the pages of your website are current. If you have hours of operation that are changed, a lot of times Google My Business will crawl many different websites to find that information. And it's always a good idea to make sure that you're checking all of those pages to make sure that they're all current. It's always really important to make sure that you follow the governing bodies and authorities. We're not the authorities on many different matters, and we want to make sure that we're extracting the right information that we need. And I think this is where, we all have to think of ourselves as our own publisher. There is a lot of information that gets distributed out there. You may only need to highlight 10% of a particular announcement. So by you being able to take that information out, distill it down for your audiences so that they can understand it quickly and easily with a link to the larger piece, that's a really, really important service that you can provide. And then making sure that you're always disclaimering your content with plain language, you're keeping people updated, you're letting them know what the process is, and then looking for all the different ways in which you can actually provide those updates so that people aren't left out in the cold. Going where the people are is huge. We all love our websites. As a marketer, I love my website. I have to come to the realization that your website is not everything for everybody. You have to kind of go where these people are and other forums and other channels and partner websites. So it's really about utilizing your social media channels, using pinned tweets, boosted posts, leveraging larger platforms like Google, which is really the gold standard when people are looking on their phones, and then plugging into your partners as well as your ambassadors and local influencers. So there's a number of really creative individuals that are amateur photographers, Instagrammers, bloggers. Work with them to help parrot out that information and develop some relationships with them. And then the last thing is, in this crazy time, we're all running around like crazy. You need to be a digital dandelion. And what I mean by that is really about working smarter, not harder. And so we've really adopted this mantra, both at Tourism Winnipeg, but now at Bandwango, where I'm at. And it's really about how to create one message and leverage it out in a bunch of different opportunities and ways. So we use a 1x8 rule. For every one piece of content we create, we always think about what are 8 different ways that we can actually distribute and translate that. So I'll give you an example. At Economic Development Winnipeg, we had a weekly post on the state of the economy. We always had a video. We would translate that into a blog so that it's text SEO heavy. We can add links to helpful things. We then push that out on social media. We sometimes tagged local media in it, which saves us from doing a press release in some instances. We translated that into an email. We added the relevant content, if there was, into our toolkit on our website. In some cases, we actually paid to promote our posts or boost it a little bit longer. And then we also translated that into some opportunities with refining some Google properties. So just to give you an example, if you're ever doing a sponsorship, think about how can I leverage this sponsorship as a further marketing platform as opposed to just that one and done piece. And then really utilizing local media and influencers. Local media can certainly be a huge promotional tool. They absolutely can be not your friend if you have a crisis that's coming up, and that's why you need to have that crisis communications plan. But really making sure that your team is well versed in not only just working with the media, but understanding how they tell a story. Oftentimes, we actually will say something in a certain way, but not the way that the media wants to receive it. They're eager for content and eager for stories. So it's really about engineering that content so that it's in a tangible, bite-sized way that the media can use. Tagging media in local, social media posts, huge opportunity. We do that a lot, and it saves us from having to write a press release. Oftentimes, we'll get coverage and lift from it. And then leveraging technology, lastly, this is a huge one. It really is going to help you to get the message out quickly. On all of our Bandwango passes, we not only use it as a lead gen tool to capture first-party data, but we have powerful messaging tools through SMS, in-app messaging, and then as well through email. And so it's really about just making sure, again, going where those people are and getting that message out as quickly as possible. Putting pop-ups on your website, yes, they can be annoying. It does really make sense. when used wisely and making sure that people are aware of the latest information, integrating into other platforms, especially ones that automatically crawl the web for events or notifications, taking advantage of any free opportunities that large platforms like Google or TripAdvisor have to make the latest information together. And then again, really looking at that social listening piece and sentiment tracking tools. So with that, that's my presentation. My information's there. I'd love to connect with any of you and talk further, but I will hand it over to our next presenter. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Cody. That was great. Oh, wonderful. So that was a lot of information. So someone has asked in the general comments, will we be providing these presentations? Yes, we will. So we will send those out to you in the coming weeks, so you can also review the info there. Next up, we have Mercedes Blackwood. And Mercedes specializes in unearthing your unique story. She had an over 10-year career in media with Canada's largest media networks, Bell Media and Rogers Television. Her experience spans public and media relations and content marketing strategy and content creation. As a result, consultant and writer, Mercedes develops and leads brand and content strategy for nonprofit and corporate clients, using a unique mix of tools to find, build, and nurture relationships. So without further ado, we'll go right into Mercedes' presentation.
Thank you so much, Kurt. I will share my screen and get right into it. Thanks a lot. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm happy that you're all here. We have heard some wonderful tips from both Katie and Cody. And what I hope is what I can talk about is how to kind of fill in the color on those great tips so that you can create messages that land, right? That matter and that people listen to and want to hear and want to participate in your event. So obviously we're in a climate where comms is tougher than ever, right? We have never had it be quite so complicated. And what I always say is the more complicated things get, the more you want to go back to simplicity. All of a sudden, simplicity really, really makes a difference. And so for a second, I just want you to forget everything else and remember that our ultimate goal is just to make people feel confident that they'll be comfortable participating in your event. Anyone can appreciate that you have thought of that you have worked through that process, and therefore you're going to share messages that land because people will be able to tell by the way that you craft and deliver those messages that you have thought of them, okay? So the slides that will follow kind of a building blocks process of how to literally craft messaging that lands, and especially within a climate where things are constantly changing. So before I get right into it, I just want to give a quick shout out to the Ontario Hospital Association. They released a report very recently that is covering exactly the same subject matter. So a shout out to them for informing some of this presentation. All right, let's get right into it. So first and foremost, if our goal is to make people feel comfortable with you, that they can feel confident that you've taken care of all that they need taken care of in order to participate, what we need to do is convey, excuse me, trust and credibility, right? So if you think about all of the organizations or sources where you've gotten your information over this time, it's because you trust them. If you didn't trust them, you didn't think they were credible, you wouldn't listen to what information they're giving you. And so I always say that the pillars of that are to be consistent, truthful, factual, and transparent. And everything we're going to say from here on in, everything that Cody and Katie talked about as well, really supports these pillars. And if we make sure that we put everything that we're sending out in the framework of these things, you're usually going to be all right. So in general, simply showing that you care about the information that you're sending out, you care whether it's truthful, you care that it's right, you care that it's consistent, you care that you do what you say you're going to do, that conveys empathy. And conveying empathy is one of the first things you need to do in order to be trustworthy, right? We need people to believe that we have thought of them, that we have made accommodations, that we have made changes based on their needs, right? So after you answer those, the 5 W's, right? Who, what, where, when, how. You want to always make sure you're answering the fundamentals as you start. You then want to get into another layer and anticipate some further questions and concerns that are more closely related to the pandemic, right? People want to know, what do I need to participate? Exactly. Where can I find more information, right? Are there maps? Are there links? Are there other things I need to look into before I come? And what happens if things change, which is probably the biggest question that we all have every single day, right? What happens if things change? And so if you are constantly addressing these second layer questions, again, you're conveying an empathy and a care. Now, always when answering these fundamental questions, you want to only use published, researched, and trusted medical and scientific bodies. None of us are those. And so we want to make sure that we are only referring to those trusted bodies when we're referring to information. And by the way, we're only referring to information and we are deferring, right? We're not those authorities. And so we're simply pointing people in the right direction when necessary. Okay, so building on that, we want to look at the process in which you put out the information. It matters. So both Cody and Katie have touched on this quite a bit, which is it does matter how that information comes to you. It makes a difference as to whether you feel comfortable receiving it and whether you can trust it, right? So accuracy is key. And speed is important, but secondary. So before you send out the information, obviously you want to triple check that it's right. Is it correct? Have we put out the correct information for right now, right? And as soon as we have made sure that that information is okay, we want to send it out as early as possible to keep our audiences informed, right? So we want to be consistent across all the communications channels, right? Cody mentioned all of the different ways that you may communicate with your audiences, right? You have email, you have blogs, you have a website, you have social media platforms. You want there to be consistency across these. You don't want someone to go to your website and see one set of guidelines and then go to Twitter and find that you've posted something different, right? Again, it erodes that trust and credibility that we've worked so hard to build up. So issue information at regular intervals and do things when you say you will. I think any of us can agree that as long as I'm told how long I might have to wait or exactly what time I need to look forward to, I can hold tight, right? I can wait until you're ready to give me the information that I need. And then in terms of consistency, I want you to think offline as well as online. So for instance, if the entrance is now the north entrance rather than the south entrance, you're going to want to remember to have some sort of sign on site to say, hey, sorry if you showed up at this entrance, it's really right over here, not so far. Here's some directions and here's how to get there. If there's personnel on the ground, you want to make sure they have all of these messages as well so that they can echo all of that good information that you're sharing and keep things consistent, right? Every time you issue information, acknowledge that it may change, but commit to keeping everyone informed, right? Everyone understands information is constantly changing. Guidelines are changing. Sometimes we don't know until later today until something is going forward or not. But as long as you've committed to keeping people informed and they are aware of that, you're going to be okay. And then lastly, this was also touched on, but it's so important to tailor the messages to each of your audiences. Consider how it lands and on who. Right. So for instance, if you're sending out a message to someone who is the parent of children who are under the age of 12 versus somebody who has accessibility complications or challenges, you have to consider how you say what you say speaks to that person and also conveys, again, that empathy in that you have thought of their situation, you've thought of what they need, and you've incorporated that in your messaging. So I think we can all agree that over the last 18 months, we've been told what to do a lot. And regardless of what your personal opinions are about following the rules, not following the rules, I think one of the things that we can all agree on is that we are fatigued, right? We're tired of constantly being told what to do and how and when, and it makes us feel like we don't have any control. So through your messaging, you can give people a little bit of that power back by empowering them and giving them autonomy. Right? You are assuming right off the top, you know how to make the best decision for you. So I'm going to give you our guidelines, our parameters, and then you decide how they affect you. You decide what level of comfort you have, right? Because we have to remember people are coming from all different levels of comfort. And so you want to make sure you're letting people know, for instance, we have an on-site event. You can come out if you feel comfortable. We've taken the precautions, so please come. We'd love to see you. But if you're not comfortable, we're also doing a session online, or we'll have a webcam there, or we have a robust online community. Please join in. We're always sharing all of the really cool things that we're doing. So join us there. Right? Again, it gives people the chance to make their own decisions within the set of guidelines, right? And then you want to make sure that the guidelines are easy to follow. So consider things like English or French isn't everybody's first language, that the simpler and more concise the instructions are, the better, and that you give people the exceptions as needed, right? And then in order to be inclusive, we need to make sure that we're not being authoritarian, demanding, or directive, right? We didn't make the rules. We can't enforce the rules in terms of, provincial or national or anything like that. And that's not our goal, right? Our goal is just to give you the information so that you can make the decision that you feel is best for you. So this last part is where I say you add color and context, right? Now that we are crafting our messages so it's factual, they're truthful, we're being consistent across our lines, we're remembering that people are coming from different levels of comfort and different walks of life, quite frankly. And so we've considered those things that we've crafted. And now is where you can add some heart, right? I say that words are very, very powerful, but especially when they come from the heart. So here is where you can take a look at what you've put together and incorporate your organizational values, emotion, and stories that really give depth to what it is you're saying. And in our context right now, what are we saying? We can't wait to see you. We have put something together that we think you're going to love. This is why we do what we do, and it's why we want to share with you. So focus on messages of solidarity and kindness, appeal to the collective good, focus on adopting desirable behavior so everyone can enjoy, right? So whatever your level of comfort is, remember that someone else might not have the same level. So let's all agree to this baseline so that everybody can come out and have fun. And then lastly, respect people's cultural beliefs and values within the context of those guidelines, and understand that there are cases where you may need to give people some alternatives and some exceptions, just so that, again, they can feel as though they have been considered, that you have crafted those messages with them in mind. So just as a quick recap, first of all, we need to convey trust and credibility. If you're believable and trustworthy, people will listen. Next, consider how that information is going out and how that supports your image of trust and credibility, right? If it's consistent, it's quick, it comes when you've said it's going to come, and it's tailored to the audience that you're speaking to, again, you are further supporting yourself as a trustworthy source. Next, empower and give autonomy. It goes a long way to having people want to buy in to what you're doing, because they have recognized that you recognize their authority and their autonomy. And then lastly, don't be afraid to add color by incorporating values and emotions and stories to really speak to and compel people, to evoke the emotion that is sometimes needed when you really want a message to land. So I hope that all of those things are helpful to you as you craft your messages. And I want to say, you're all right. You've got this. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Mercedes. That was great. We really enjoyed that. And that concludes our presentations for today. There are a couple questions here that we're going to get to. So the first one is in the question and answer box right now. And I'd like to actually send it to maybe all three panelists. And it comes from Pauline Gladstone. And this is her question. How am I supposed to enforce the rules when someone shows up at an event and doesn't want to comply with the guidelines? How do you turn them away and avoid being authoritarian or demanding? So maybe Katie, do you want to start with this one?
Did you want me to cry in front of everyone? I think that is different than communication strategies. And my recommendation would be to the best of your ability to communicate in advance to any potential audience member who's coming to your venue or your event that here are the protocols that are in place. Kind of that know before you go email, signage, as Mercedes talked about. And then if there's a confrontation on site, that's when then you need different kind of training. It goes beyond communications, and it's like conflict resolution management training, or me crying or something. But I think the better that you can prepare people in advance as to what they expect is my recommendation.
Great. Cody, did you want to tackle this one?
Sure. I think I would agree with everything that Katie says, that especially this is definitely a conflict resolution kind of customer service scenario as opposed to the messaging. Hopefully the messaging that you've conveyed prevents these type of situations. However, they do happen. What my suggestion would be is always try to work with them to offer a solution and an alternative. So if they're not allowed in because they refuse to wear a mask, if you are live streaming it, you can suggest that as an option and then work with them on whatever that looks like, whether it's a refund, et cetera, et cetera. At the end of the day, we are just the messengers, and unfortunately, sometimes we do get charged for those things. But it's really about trying to offer and work through the different options that they have, similar to a child with a temper tantrum. Would you like to go to bed without dinner, or would you like to have dinner, or would you like a 5-minute timeout? So sometimes, even if the options are good, just providing that option is better than just saying, no, you're not coming in.
Wonderful. Thanks, Cody. Mercedes, do you want to tackle this one, please?
Yeah, I love that. And Cody, if you want to come help with my child, you're great. I agree. First of all, try to avoid it as much as possible in communicating those things ahead of time, being really, really clear. What do you need to get in? What do you need to participate? Unfortunately, if you don't have these things, we cannot allow you to join in. In this case, it's okay, I think, to do a little bit of scapegoating, which is that these are guidelines set down by the province or by your region. These are not decisions that we have made. And so simply sharing that you are following the guidelines so that you can be compliant and be in operation, I think is also fair. But again, it does come down to once you're on the ground, that's a customer service thing. And that does come with, I suppose, training those folks who will be face-to-face and having them know, giving them some tools and some language so that they can respond in a way that hopefully doesn't escalate things.
Great. Thanks very much for those answers, guys. That's great. It really clears it up. I want to remind everyone, we're just kind of winding down the webinar right now. So if you have any questions, we have a few minutes left. Please tap them in. I have one question for you while we're doing it. And yeah, Pauline acknowledges, she says thank you to everyone. So I have one question. If our event has to be canceled last minute, what are some things you might suggest to include in messaging that encourages people to stay engaged beyond that one event? So kind of like the long-term process of canceling an event. And maybe could we start with Cody this time on that question, please?
Sure. I mean, it's obviously never an ideal thing to have an event canceled. I think, the first and most important thing is to lead with empathy and transparency in terms of why it was canceled, without throwing anyone under the bus. And this is where marketing and messaging is so key and critical. You never want to blame, but you want to make sure that it's clear. Is it because, it was understaffed? Was it because of an issue with the venue? Was it because of new restrictions? Try to provide as much clarity in that department as possible. And then lead with other opportunities to get connected. What any sort of additional, is there going to be a reschedule? Should they follow us for more information? If it was a paid event, what's happening with respect to their refund? So try to think about all of those opportunities. There could potentially even be a Q&A forum that gets developed and linked to that message. And then I'll certainly leave it to my other two panelists to add to that as well.
Thanks, Cody. Thanks very much. Katie, did you want to tackle this one, please?
Oh, gosh, many months ago, I rebranded myself. Instead of Director of Marketing Communications, I became the Director of Cancellations and Reverse Revenue. Surreal resume build working through a pandemic. Yeah, I mean, this is where your really clear, concise communications can be your friend. Sometimes these cancellations come at a very last minute. Maybe you had a sick artist. And so that CRM that Cody talked about, that database, that contact relationship management tool, allowing you to very swiftly and quickly reach out to your patrons is key. And, you know, it's not their fault. So Mercedes talked about empathy. And so, you know, don't dance around the fact if you're giving them a refund or not, or you're going to try and like be silly and force them to go to something else. No, a refund has to be on the table. And my other pro tip I would just say for you is at MTC, we're in the practice of, we send out daily post-show surveys. So if something has gone sideways one night, be sure to turn off the survey that's supposed to go out the next morning that says, how did you enjoy your show? That's really problematic if you had in fact canceled your show. That's my pro tip.
Wonderful. Thanks very much, Katie. And finally, Mercedes, do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, that's really great practical advice from someone who has done it, right? And I really vigorously, you know, was nodding at the point where you said, look, you have to do the customer service portion, right? So first of all, yeah, don't hedge. So one of the things with the speed element of information is as quickly as you can get that information out. We're so sorry, it is canceled. Let people know it as quickly as you can. And then yes, what are the recourse? What's the next steps? And then in terms of keeping them engaged, it's about talking about other opportunities they have to engage with you. Do you have other shows that are coming right up? Do you have other things going on during culture days that they can jump into? Do you have exactly as Cody said, do you have another format that people can try? Just give people the options. People appreciate that. I think folks understand that things go wrong and things get canceled, but it really is about how you follow up with them afterwards.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Excellent. So there's another question that has come in here, and it says, thank you to everyone. Very interesting. Special thanks to Mercedes. Very clear advice. Special question. How to communicate with younger public? Maybe can we start with Mercedes this time?
Sure. So I always say the fundamentals apply to any age. Doesn't matter how old you are or young you are, you appreciate clear, concise information. And so as long as that is your tone, you're going to connect with people who want to connect with you. If a young person has come to you because they want to participate and you have done all of the things that we're suggesting and you've added your own color, you're going to be fine. I would say that in terms of specifically reaching certain demos, touch on what Cody said, which is it depends on your databases, right? So you will know, generally speaking, on your social media channels, sometimes your email and such, what's the demographics of your audience. And so you can, for instance, if something is a little bit more younger skewing, you can skew towards the younger skewing social media platforms, right? If you have Twitter, if you have Instagram, you know, whatever the kids are looking at, it changes every 5 minutes, but whatever they're looking at, just make sure your messaging is there as well. If perhaps nobody on your staff is well versed on something like TikTok, well, then find some expertise, right? Find somebody who does know how to use TikTok and then get your messaging on TikTok as well. But just again, I wouldn't worry too much about the age of the person that you're hitting. It really is more about their circumstance and the fact that you are communicating clearly, regardless.
Thanks very much, Mercedes. Cody, you want to have any thoughts on that one?
Sure. I think I agree with everything Mercedes said, and kind of reemphasize my go where your audiences are. Look at what platforms those audiences are really talking in and what format, whether it's a video, music, photos. Again, you know, completely agree with Mercedes on clear and concise messaging. That is 150%. If you're trying to target a specific demo, you know, the best thing to do is research exactly what they're all about, how they like to receive messages, and what their values are, and really see and make sure that you can align those objectives. What you don't want to do is have an intern that's, you know, 17 or 18 and they know social media and you're going to hand them the keys with no research, right? So that's not a great strategy. However, I think there are opportunities to learn from experts outside of your organization to make sure that you're creating and crafting messaging that matters, and also helping to shift your organizational values to the values of what we're all looking for as it relates to, you know, diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability, and all of those really, really important pieces.
Wonderful. Great. And Katie, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think honestly, Mercedes and Cody, I think you've really done a beautiful job of, touching on the fundamentals. I don't think I have anything additional.
Great, great. Yeah, sometimes they're pretty good. It's hard to add on after that. So I noticed that we're at the very end of our webinar now. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. Once again, we'd like to thank the Manitoba Arts Council for supporting this initiative. Culture Days Manitoba would like to thank our national office in Toronto for partnering with us. And of course, we'd like to thank our 3 outstanding panelists. I noticed someone has asked once again if this information is going to be available afterwards. And yes, it will be. So please follow in the comment bar, there's the national office's website. Please keep on following that. And next week, we will have a video. People can rewatch this. And we're also going to distribute the different presentations to everyone. So I hope that you all have fantastic events this year. Thanks again to the panelists for helping us navigate these dirty waters of communicating right now. And I hope you all have a fantastic week. Bye for now.